The humiliation, the grand hall of the Kragon Empire's citadel was silent, save for the low murmur of the courtiers watching from the sidelines. The alien species of the galaxy, proud, powerful, and unyielding, had gathered for an important meeting. Today, the future of several intergalactic alliances was at stake, and the most influential leaders were in attendance, including the young and brash Raxil, the Warlord's son. He was known across the galaxy for his arrogance and unshakable belief in the superiority of his people. The Krogan were the strongest empire, and Raxil wore that knowledge like armor. On the other side of the room, a lone figure stood out. Kira, the human diplomat sent to negotiate a peace agreement, seemed small and almost insignificant compared to the towering Kragan. To the Krogan, humans were a species barely worth considering, primitive, weak, and insignificant. But there was something about Kira that stood in stark contrast to her outward appearance. Her calm demeanor, her quiet confidence, even the way she carried herself, sent a message. She was no ordinary diplomat. She had come to the heart of the Kragan Empire not just to negotiate peace, but to make sure humanity's voice was heard. Raxiel had been briefed on the human diplomat's visit, and he found it amusing. The thought that a species so small and weak could represent a threat to the mighty Krogan was laughable. To him, Earth was just another insignificant speck in the universe, nothing more than a minor nuisance. He hadn't expected this meeting to be anything other than a formality. As Kira stood before him, ready to speak, Raxel couldn't resist. The crowd, sensing the tension, looked on in silence, but Raxel, filled with his typical arrogance, leaned forward, mocking her quietly enough for only the inner circle to hear. He sneered. "Do you really think Earth has any place in the galactic order, human?" Raxel's voice was dripping with disdain. "You're barely even capable of space travel. What makes you think we'll take you seriously?" The insult hung in the air. Kira's gaze never faltered. The Krogan were known for their brutal strength and lack of subtlety, and she knew what was coming. But what Raxel didn't know was that Kira had spent her life preparing for moments like this. She wasn't intimidated by his size, his power, or his insults. "Raxel, you may have underestimated us, but I'm here to prove that we are not what you think," Kira replied calmly, her voice smooth and controlled. She could feel the weight of his eyes on her, watching for any sign of weakness, ready to strike again. But she wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. Raxel scoffed, amused by her composure. "Prove it," he mocked, chuckling. "You've come here, to our empire, to lecture us. You think you can change our minds with words alone." The room was still. The Krogan gathered there had expected their prince to dominate the conversation. But now their attention was fully on Kira. They watched, waiting for her reaction. Raxel's insults were well known. He had humiliated countless dignitaries in the past, breaking them with his sharp tongue and proud demeanor. He expected the same from the human diplomat. But Kira stood there, unfazed. She wasn't going to stoop to his level. Instead, she stepped forward, making sure her presence was felt. "I am not here to beg for your mercy or approval," she said. Her eyes locked with Raxel's. "I am here to make you understand that humanity is no longer the weak species you think it is. We are not here to serve or submit. We have earned our place in this galaxy, and we will make sure you understand that." The silence in the room deepened. Raxel's face shifted from amusement to something else, something that could almost be described as doubt. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Kira. This human was different. She wasn't afraid, and she wasn't cowering. The confidence in her words made him feel something he hadn't expected. Irritation. He had insulted her, humiliated her, and yet she stood tall, unfazed by his arrogance. What had seemed like a small moment of superiority was quickly turning into something else. And that annoyed Raxel. With a scornful laugh, he waved his hand, dismissing her words. "You think you're the first to talk big in front of me," he sneered. "You're nothing. Just another small, insignificant species trying to make waves. You'll learn your place soon enough, human." But Kira's calm didn't waver. She understood the weight of the situation. Raxel's arrogance, though obvious, wasn't just a show for her, it was a mistake. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this insult, would be the turning point. And it wasn't going to be in his favor. "I don't need to prove myself to you or anyone else," Kira said, her voice now carrying a quiet but undeniable authority. "I'm here because we have something worth fighting for. And I promise you, Raxile, underestimating humanity will be the fatal mistake you'll regret." Her words, calm but fierce, lingered in the air like a challenge. The Krogan may have thought they were untouchable, but Earth was about to show them what happens when a species that's been pushed too far finally rises up. As Raxiel and the Krogan elite stood in stunned silence, the realization began to dawn. On him, this human diplomat was no ordinary representative. This was not someone who would cower in the face of insults, but someone who would rise up and deliver an unexpected blow. A blow that, if not properly handled, could destroy the prideful reputation of the Kragan Empire. Raxiel had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. The diplomat's response to room was thick with tension. Raxiel, the arrogant son of the mighty Warlord, stood towering over Kira. His mocking laughter echoed off the walls of the Kragan citadel, a laugh that betrayed his belief in the superiority of his species. He thought he had crushed her, that his insults had humiliated the human diplomat in front of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Krogan courtiers exchanged glances, waiting for the inevitable reaction from Kira. Would she back down? Would she crumble under the weight of the humiliation? But instead of cowering, Kira's eyes narrowed, her face betraying nothing but a quiet strength. She had expected this. It wasn't the first time humanity had been underestimated. The galaxy had made a habit of thinking of Earth as weak, its people powerless. But today, Earth was sending a message, and she was the one to deliver it. Taking a slow breath, Kira's voice rang out calmly, cutting through the noise of Raxel's insults. "Raxel, I understand your pride. I know you have been raised to believe that your species is invincible, that nothing could ever challenge the Krogan Empire. But I'm here to tell you that humanity is not what you think it is, and underestimating us will be the mistake that you'll come to regret." Her words hung in the air, almost too powerful for the room to contain. Raxel's smirk faltered for a moment. There was no hesitation in Kira's voice, no fear in her gaze. It was as if she had already won, even before the contest had begun. The Krogan around the room exchanged uncertain looks. They had never seen a human behave this way. They expected Kira to grovel, to beg for mercy. Instead, she stood tall, as if she was already the equal of any Kragan in the room. Raxel's eyes darkened. His amusement turned to anger as he realized that Kira wasn't intimidated. His pride, shattered by the human diplomat's poise, flared up once again. "You think your words have weight, human," he sneered. "What could you possibly show me that I haven't already seen? You're nothing. You are just a species that hasn't even learned how to wield a true weapon. What makes you think I'll take you seriously?" Kira's lips curled into a small smile, but it wasn't one of submission. It was a smile that hinted at something far more dangerous. What if I told you that humanity's greatest strength isn't in brute force or violence, but in our ability to adapt and outthink even the strongest empires? Our true power doesn't come from weapons alone, it comes from the will to survive, the will to keep going when all odds are against us. And you've made a fatal mistake by not recognizing that. The room fell silent. Raxel's brow furrowed. He had been expecting Kira to flinch, to break down. But instead, she stood before him as calm and composed as ever, speaking with a certainty that unnerved him. The words she spoke didn't just carry weight, they made him question his own beliefs. Could it be possible that the humans had something more than just desperation and weakness? Could they actually be capable of something greater? I've spent my life learning the ways of war, Raxel finally said, his voice lower, tinged with both frustration and curiosity. What do you know of war, human? What can your species possibly offer that would be worth anything in the eyes of the galaxy? Kira's eyes glinted, and for the first time in the conversation, there was a hint of challenge in her voice. We know that war isn't just about physical strength. It's about strategy, intelligence, and resilience. It's about finding a way to win when everyone believes you have nothing to fight with. She paused for a moment, letting the words sink in, and then continued, That's why you're making a mistake. Raxel, you believe humanity is weak because you can't see what truly makes us powerful. It's not just about ships or weapons. It's about the will to fight for what's right. It's about knowing that no matter how many times we fall, we will always get back up. Raxel's jaw tightened as he stared at her, disbelief creeping into his mind. For the first time, the unshakable arrogance that had been his trademark faltered. Could it really be that the humans had something he couldn't understand? Something that wasn't about fighting with strength, but with something deeper. He stepped back, his fists clenching, his mind racing. Kira had just delivered a blow that cut deeper than any physical strike could have. He hadn't expected this, and he didn't like it. I don't care what you say, human, Raxel growled, his voice full of venom. You've already lost the battle. The Kragon will crush you, and your people will be nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history. Kira remained unfazed. Maybe, or maybe this is just the beginning. And one day, you'll look back and realize that you made a fatal mistake by underestimating us. The tension in the room was palpable. The Kragan around them, once certain of their superiority, now began to wonder if this human diplomat was right. Could humanity really have something they couldn't see? Could this peaceful diplomat be holding a secret strength that could shatter the Krogan Empire? As Kira turned and walked away, leaving Raxel standing in stunned silence, a single thought lingered in the air. Humanity had just begun to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. A dangerous game there. Krogan court was buzzing with activity. As the meeting came to a close, Raxel stood in the middle of the room, his fists clenched and his mind racing. He had been humiliated, not in the way he expected, but in a way that made him question everything. The human diplomat, Kira, had done the impossible. She had turned the tables on him, and now every Kragan in the room could see it. The anger that bubbled within him had nowhere to go but outward, and it was clear that the young warlord's pride had taken a fatal blow. As the Kragan leaders filed out of the room, murmurs of surprise and disbelief filled the air. It wasn't just the way Kira had conducted herself. Fit was the sheer calmness, the certainty with which she spoke. Humanity had never been known for its power in battle or technology. But Kira had shown that there was something much deeper at play. And that Raxil knew was dangerous. Raxil was furious. His pride had been bruised, and he had no idea how to fix it. The idea that a species he thought so insignificant had just outwitted him. One that had never been known for its strength filled him with both disbelief and dread. He couldn't let this stand. He couldn't let Kira's words remain unchallenged. If he didn't act now, he risked losing more than just face. He could lose the respect of the Krogan Empire itself. But Kira had issued a challenge that had forced Raxil into a corner. She had proposed a contest of strategy and intellect, not brute force. To him, this was an insult. A Kragan was born to fight, to dominate with power, not to play games of the mind. And yet, here was this human woman making him look like a fool in front of his own people. This contest would be his chance to redeem himself, to prove that humans were nothing more than a distraction. The idea of using strategy rather than strength gnawed at him. He had always been told that the Krogan Empire ruled with an iron fist, that strength was what mattered most. But Kira's challenge made him rethink everything. If she won this contest, it would send a message to the entire galaxy that Earth was capable of more than just survival, that they could not only stand up to the galaxy's might, but outsmart it. Raxil's mind raced as he considered the stakes. He had already underestimated her once. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. The challenge was set, but it was more than just a game now. The fate of his reputation and the Krogan Empire's power was on the line. If humanity won, the galaxy would know that the Krogan were no longer the uncontested rulers. They would be seen as weak, vulnerable to a species that once seemed inconsequential. Raxil wasn't prepared to let that happen. A contest beyond strategy. The days leading up to the contest were filled with tension. Word of the challenge had spread quickly, and now the galaxy was watching. Every species that had once considered Earth a weakling was paying attention. Would Raxil, the son of the Warlord, be humiliated in front of the entire Krogan Empire by a human diplomat? Or would he prove that brute force and pride still reigned supreme? The contest itself was deceptively simple, a war simulation. Both Raxil and Kira would control armies and navigate complex battle scenarios, testing their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their opponents. But what Raxil didn't realize was that Kira's strength wasn't just in playing the game, it was in understanding the psychology of those who underestimated her. Raxil was about to learn that strategy was not just about intellect. It was about foresight, understanding the weaknesses of your opponent, and using their own arrogance against them. The contest began, and Raxil immediately took a strong, confident position. His military strategies were aggressive, designed to overwhelm and crush his opponent with sheer power. He believed this was the way to win. A Kragan would never back down, and neither would he. But Kira didn't respond the way he expected. She moved with precision, analyzing Raxil's moves with a calm and calculated eye. She wasn't just playing the game, she was making him play by her rules. Slowly, Raxil began to realize that he was losing control of the match. His aggressive tactics were being countered, his plans foiled with ease. What he didn't understand was that Kira wasn't just attacking his strategy, she was attacking his pride, his belief that strength alone could win. With each passing minute, Raxil's frustration grew. Every move he made seemed to backfire, every advantage he sought slipping through his fingers. Kira's calm, calculated maneuvers were starting to break his resolve. He had underestimated her. just as he had underestimated humanity. As the final moves of the game approached, Raxil was forced into a corner. Kira had anticipated every one of his moves, and now the game was almost over. The moment of truth had arrived. Raxil, once so sure of himself, now stood on the verge of defeat. The turning point. Raxil's pride, once unshakable, now wavered as Kira's strategy unfolded before him. He had always relied on his strength, his unyielding will, and the confidence that came with being the son of the greatest warlord the Krogan Empire had ever known. But in this contest, where intellect, strategy, and patience reigned, strength alone was not enough. The weight of his arrogance began to settle over him like a crushing shadow. The final moments of the game were approaching, and Raxil could feel the tide of the contest shifting against him. His aggressive tactics, his forward momentum, had been his signature approach, one that had never failed him before. Yet, here in this game, every move he made seemed to be countered effortlessly by Kira. With each passing minute, his frustration mounted. The more he tried to overpower her, the more he found himself trapped, outwitted, and cornered. Kira, with her calm demeanor and sharp mind, never showed any sign of rushing. She took her time, letting Raxil make the first move, watching him carefully, studying his every action. Her strategy wasn't about overpowering him, was about outlasting him, outsmarting him, and most importantly, making him doubt everything. He believed in Raxil's eyes, narrowed as he scanned the game board, his mind racing. There had to be a way to turn this around, to prove that Kira's human intellect was no match for Krogon's strength. He couldn't let his father's legacy be tarnished by a single loss to a human diplomat. His rage was rising. But no matter how many times he adjusted his tactics, Kira was always one step ahead. He had underestimated her. Worse, he had underestimated humanity. He tried one last desperate Movan, all-out assault, a final push to break Kira's defenses. His fingers hovered over the controls, ready to execute his attack. It was bold, reckless, and perhaps his only chance at redemption. But as soon as he initiated the command, he knew it was too late. Kira had anticipated his every move, and in an instant his forces were dismantled. Her counterattack was swift and precise, like a predator striking at its prey. Within seconds, his fleet was crippled, and his remaining forces scattered. The game was over. Raxil sat frozen, staring at the display. The realization hit him like a hammer blow. He had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and defeated not by a more powerful enemy, but by the sharpness of a human mind. Kira had done the impossible. She had made him look like a fool in front of the Krogan elite, and the galaxy was watching. Suspense. The room was eerily silent. The courtiers, who had expected Raxil to win easily, were stunned into shock. No one spoke, and the only sound was the hum of the game's system as Kira's victory was confirmed. Raxil's face was flushed with a mix of fury and disbelief. He had been humiliated publicly and completely. The once proud son of the Warlord had been defeated by the very species he had mocked. Kira, still calm and composed, turned to face the Krogan officials, her expression unreadable. She had won. But the battle for Earth's place in the galaxy was far from over. The hidden strength of humanity as the game ended, Raxil's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. This was more than just a contest. This wasn't just about losing to a human. It was about what it meant for his people, for the entire galaxy. Humanity had just proven that they could outthink the most powerful empires, that they weren't just weaklings waiting to be crushed. They had shown the Krogan that intelligence, strategy, and resolve could be just as deadly as any weapon. Thoughts turned to his father. He had been raised to believe that strength was everything. The Krogan Empire thrived on war and might, and Raxel had been groomed to follow in his father's footsteps. But now, with the loss still hanging heavy in the air, he began to question everything he had been taught. Had the Krogan made a mistake by dismissing humanity? And if so, what would that mean for the galaxy? Kira's victory, though complete, was not just a personal triumph, it was a symbol of humanity's potential. And with that symbol came a new sense of respect. The Kragan had been forced to reckon with their own assumptions. The galaxy was filled with powerful empires, but humanity had just proven that it was capable of something much greater, something they had never seen before. As Kira looked out over the Kragan court, she knew the real challenge was just beginning. She had won the contest, but Earth still had much to prove. The Krogan would not forget this humiliation, and other galactic powers were already watching. The true question was not whether humanity could win a single contest, but whether humanity could rise to lead the galaxy in the face of overwhelming odds. The fallout the moment Kira's victory was announced. The Kragan court erupted into murmurs. The entire room seemed to buzz with disbelief. No one had expected this outcome. The son of the Warlord, Raxel, who had never once been defeated in a challenge, had been outplayed by a human diplomat. It was a humiliating defeat, and it sent ripples through the Kragan Empire. The galactic hierarchy had always assumed that brute strength and domination were the only qualities that mattered. But now they had been confronted with something they could not ignore: intellect, strategy, and humanity's relentless will to survive. Raxel, once filled with unshakable pride, stood frozen in place. His fists clenched at his sides as he fought. To regain his composure, his gaze was fixed on Kira, who stood across the room, poised and calm, a quiet smirk playing on her lips. To her, this was just another step in proving humanity's worth. To Raxel, it was an assault on everything he believed. But as the stunned courtiers continued to discuss the results of the contest, the realization began to settle in. Kira's victory was not just about winning a game, it was a challenge to the entire foundation of the Krogan Empire. It showed the galaxy that brute strength alone could be overcome. The Krogan were not invincible, and their belief in their supremacy had been shattered. For Raxel, it was more than just embarrassment. It was a turning point. He had been raised to believe that strength was the key to everything. To be the strongest meant to rule, to control. But Kira's strategy had shown him the error of that belief. The humans weren't just capable of surviving, they could outthink their opponents. And now, the galaxy was beginning to see that across the galaxy, word of Raxel's defeat spread like wildfire. It didn't matter that the Krogan Empire was powerful. It didn't matter that they had conquered countless planets and ruled with fear. What mattered now was that a human diplomat had made their prince look like a fool in front of the entire galaxy. The political ramifications were enormous. As Raxel's defeat became the topic of heated discussions across various empires, the Kragan leaders met behind closed doors. Raxel's father, the Warlord, had always been the most feared leader in the galaxy. His empire had thrived on the belief that power could crush anything in its path. But the Warlord's son had failed, and failure, in the eyes of the Krogan, was something to be punished. Raxel stood before his father, his head lowered in shame. The Warlord's gaze was cold, his eyes never leaving his son's face. He could feel the weight of his father's disappointment. "You've embarrassed the Empire," the Warlord growled, his voice like gravel. A single human diplomat has reduced you to nothing. Your pride has been your downfall, Raxil. Raxil's jaw clenched. The sting of his father's words cut deep. He had failed to live up to the legacy of his father, to the expectations placed upon him. But it wasn't just the failure itself that hurt, it was the realization that humanity had something the Kragan had never truly valued, something that now threatened to change the galaxy. Father, I underestimated them, Raxil admitted, his voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. I thought the humans were weak. I thought they would fall before the might of the Kragan. And now, look at what you've done, his father spat. You've given them the chance to challenge us. And what's worse, you've allowed them to believe that they can stand against the Krogan Empire. We will have to fight to regain our honor. Raxil's anger flared. He was no fool. He knew the consequences of this failure. The Krogan Empire would not forgive this loss easily. But Kira's victory had also planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Maybe humanity wasn't as weak as he had always thought. Maybe they had something more to offer than just a few scraps of technology and a willingness to fight for survival. I will fix this, Raxil said, his voice filled with determination. I will show the galaxy that the Krogan will never be defeated by the likes of them. His father's eyes softened for a moment, as though he recognized the inner conflict raging in his son. You may try, Raxil, but understand this. The galaxy has already seen what humanity can do. You must do more than crush them now. You must make them understand why they should never challenge the Kragan again. Asterisk the seeds of change back on Earth. Kira's victory was met with a quiet sense of triumph. She had known the risks of challenging the Kragan, but her words had carried more weight than anyone had expected. Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet. Was now a player in the galaxy's political landscape. But Kira knew this victory was just the beginning. The true battle was not about proving humanity's worth to the Krogan. It was about ensuring that the rest of the galaxy understood what humanity was capable of. As the days passed, Kira received messages of support from other species, some of whom had once been oppressed by the Krogan Empire. The victory over Raxil had sent a message. If humanity could stand up to the Krogan, maybe they could stand up to the other empires as well. And this shift was already beginning to change. The dynamics of the galaxy, humanity's reputation was evolving. From weak and insignificant to powerful and capable. But not everyone in the galaxy was ready to accept this new order. The Krogan, wounded by their defeat, began to rally their forces, preparing for retaliation. Raxil, driven by his need for revenge, had already begun plotting his next move. He would not let a human diplomat outsmart him again, but Kira, though confident in her victory, knew that humanity would have to face greater challenges. The galaxy would not hand over power so easily, and the Kragan would stop at nothing to regain their position. The question now wasn't whether humanity had the strength to fight back, but was whether humanity had the resolve to continue proving itself in a galaxy that had long underestimated them. Asterisk the victory over Raxil's arrogance had set off a chain of events that neither Earth nor the Kragan Empire could control. The humiliation of their warlord's son had rippled across the galaxy, and now the Krogan Empire was brimming with a burning desire for retribution. But the Krogan were not only motivated by pride, they were also fueled by fear. Fear that the galaxy's perception of them had shifted irreparably, and that other empires, once subjugated by their might rise against them. Raxil had spent sleepless nights planning his counterattack. His failure had haunted him, gnawing at his pride. Like an invisible wound, He had been the one who had mocked the humans, the one who had undercut their power, and now he had to make things right. The Krogan were proud, and Raxil would not let Earth's success stand without consequence. But this time, his anger would not cloud his judgment. He had learned from his mistakes. He would not underestimate humanity again. The Krogan Council, gathering in secrecy, had started to make its move. Raxil was ready to lead the charge this time, with a more tactical approach. The Krogan had learned something important from their defeat. Brute strength could not defeat the human mind. They needed to outthink them, not just overpower them. And so, they began to plan their counterattack. Not in the way they had originally thought, but through espionage, sabotage, and calculated strikes ways to destabilize Earth without directly confronting its military. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Kira knew that this was just the beginning. She had expected the Krogan to retaliate, but the level of precision and strategy in their next move was something she hadn't anticipated. Earth had been preparing for war, but Kira had always hoped to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Yet, the Krogan were relentless, and their pride would not let them forget the humiliation they had suffered. Kira had learned one important thing. The Krogan Empire, while brutal, was also cunning, and the galaxy, already shaken by the events, had begun to turn its eyes to Earth. No longer was humanity seen as weak, but as a species capable of strategic brilliance, capable of challenging the empires that had long ruled the stars. Still, that didn't mean the galaxy would accept humanity's rise without resistance. The first signs of Krogan sabotage were subtle. A small fleet of Krogan ships appeared on the fringes of Earth's solar system, scanning, observing, but making no direct moves. It seemed like just another diplomatic presence. But Kira, ever watchful, knew that this was not just a display of power. It was the beginning of something darker. The Krogan were testing Earth, probing its defenses, looking for vulnerabilities. They weren't ready for an all-out war just yet. But they were setting the stage for one. Earth's leaders, who had been celebrating the diplomatic breakthrough, quickly realized that the Krogan would never play fair. The brief period of peace had been a facade. Behind closed doors, Earth's top strategists and diplomats worked to prepare for the Krogan's next move. The question now was, would humanity take the offensive or wait for the Krogan to make their first move? The galactic underworld's days tensions continued to build. Another player emerged from the shadows and underground network of spies, traders, and mercenaries, operating outside the watchful eyes of the Council and the established galactic powers. This hidden faction, known only as the Silencers, had been watching the rise of humanity from afar. They saw opportunity in Earth's newfound strength, but they also recognized a threat to their own control over the galaxy's black market. The Silencers had one thing in common with the Krogan. They thrived on chaos, and they believed that humanity's influence could be a destabilizing force. To them, Earth's rise threatened their lucrative underground dealings, and they began to plot how they could undermine humanity before it grew too powerful. Kira knew nothing about this new threat, but it was only a matter of time before she found out. The new galactic order. Tension in the galaxy had reached a breaking point. Earth, having proven itself through both diplomacy and warfare, stood at the edge of a new era. Humanity's victory over the Krogan's arrogance had sparked a ripple of change. But while Earth had gained respect from unexpected quarters, the price of this newfound influence was steep. The Krogan, wounded but far from defeated, had retreated to regroup, while shadows in the galaxy stirred, preparing for what might come next. The Kragan were no longer the only power to fear in the galaxy. Earth's triumph, though hard-earned, had sent a clear message. Humanity was no longer a weak species to be trampled upon. Humanity had taken their place in the galactic hierarchy, but maintaining that place would require more than just military strength or diplomatic skill. It would require careful navigation through a galaxy that had long been ruled by the powerful, the ruthless, and the entrenched powers of empires back on Earth. Kira watched the galactic landscape unfold. She knew the victory over Raxil and the Krogan had been just the beginning. The Krogan Empire had suffered a loss, but the real test was not just about dealing with the Kroganate, was about dealing with the aftermath. Earth had made powerful enemies, but they had also made powerful allies, and now it was time to see how those alliances would play out. The warships that had once been the pride of the Krogan Empire were now being rethought in human hands. Earth had learned from the past, but the galaxy had already learned to expect the unexpected from humanity. The Kragan, though beaten, were watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. And the galaxy's smaller powers, now emboldened by humanity's rise, had begun to reconsider their own places in the cosmic order. Kira's mind raced as she stood before the council, preparing her next move. The political winds were shifting. She had successfully navigated the treacherous waters of the Krogan challenge, but now she had to deal with the aftermath. The Silencers, the underground faction of mercenaries and spies, had begun to stir in the shadows, threatening to derail the fragile peace humanity had started to build. Earth's rise was now a beacon for both opportunity and danger. It wasn't just the Krogan or the Silencers that posed a threat to it, was the galaxy itself. Humanity was not alone in this new struggle. Species that had once been content to stay out of galactic politics were now watching, ready to challenge Earth's newfound power. There were those who believed that Earth's rise was a threat to their dominance and that the galaxy could not afford to allow humanity to grow unchecked. New alliances were being formed, and the power dynamics of the galaxy were being redefined. Kira knew that Earth could not afford to sit idle. The next move had to be made. With the Kragan weakened, now was the time to strike new alliances with those who had long been oppressed, with those who had witnessed humanity's rise and had come to believe in the possibility of a different future. But making alliances also meant facing new enemies. It meant navigating the web of power, betrayal, and secrecy that had always been the fabric of the galaxy. The aftermath of Raxil's defeat. Raxil, still reeling from his public defeat, had retreated to his private chambers. The weight of the loss was unbearable, but more than his personal humiliation, it was the threat to his people that gnawed at him. The Krogan Empire had lost its dominance in the galaxy's political landscape. For the first time in centuries, the Krogan were not the undisputed leaders. Earth's victory had shaken the foundation of everything they had built, but the Kragan were nothing if not resilient. Raxil knew the Kragan would rise again, but the question remained, would they seek peace or revenge? Would they seek an alliance with humanity, or would they see their defeat as a reason to destroy what had embarrassed them? The growing influence of Earth on Earth, the new order was slowly beginning to take shape. Kira, now seen as a leader in humanity's rise, stood at the crossroads. The battles were not over far from it, but Earth had shown that it had the will, the strength, and the intelligence to carve out a place in the stars. The question was, would Earth use its newfound influence for good, or would it succumb to the same power-hungry forces that had ruled the galaxy for so long? The quiet before the storm as Earth's new alliances began to form. A shadowy figure watched from the distant reaches of space. The Silencers, an underground network of mercenaries, traders, and spies, had taken note of Earth's rise. They had always thrived in chaos, and the shift in power was the perfect opportunity to strike. Their interests were simple: power and control. Humanity's rise to prominence threatened their fragile hold over the galaxy's underworld. The Silencers had one goal: to make sure Earth's influence didn't grow beyond their reach.